Welcome to A Lunch with Biggie, a podcast about small business and creatives sharing their stories and inspiring you. My guest today started a podcast as a hobby and as a way to advertise his business, as an excuse to catch up with old friends and meeting new ones. Little did he know that it would become one of the most popular podcasts in Orlando, and 8 years and still going. Please welcome the host of Scotch and Good Conversation, Peter von Taborsky, right?
Yeah,
Taborsky.
Peter. It's just Peter.
Yeah, I know it's just Peter, but I always like to say the whole name.
No, it says Peter James Arthur von Taborsky.
Oh yes, and very very nice name. It's like it's funny because I actually during my research I watched you do a live one. I forget his name, the guy that does a live show over in Orlando. It's a guy who does a live show.
Ted Bogart.
Yes.
Totally out of my element.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting to watch.
I don't do well on camera.
Oh, that's a weird. Well, I mean, who does really do well on camera? Especially when the fact that you're doing an interview.
We're really good-looking men. We should do well on camera.
Yes, but I think what it is also is the fact that like when you do a podcast, and I know we're ready. This is going to be one of those where I know how it's going to go.
You've been on my show.
Yeah, I know how this is. But when you do a podcast or a show where you're both not looking at each other, and you're looking at screen, that's where it feels weird to me. To not be able to have that connection.
I think he stepped up his game where he's got actually multiple cameras now, but at that point he was just shooting off a cell phone.
Yeah, no, it's kind of
so it was really throwing me off.
Yeah,
and I'm not totally comfortable. I was on Tom and Dan last week, and they got a full production.
Yeah, they're
you know, but they're cool as hell. But it's still there's lights and there's like 4 cameras.
Yeah, they're definitely at a level.
Yeah, they're
all right. So I definitely appreciate you taking some time to have I guess in my case have a lunch and a good conversation with me.
Yeah.
So my first question always is go to lunch or sandwich.
Now, let's do now.
Yeah.
Now, whatever's for sale at Sprouts. I think I have a buffalo chicken, with, some Kobe Jack, and I'll put some arugula on there and on just some bread. I'm not a big condiments guy.
Really? No sauce, no condiments.
Depends on, what I'm eating. With the buffalo chicken, I like to just taste the buffalo chicken.
Yeah.
I've gotten to this thing because I've been freezing my bread because I'm a single guy now.
There's nothing wrong with it. I freeze my bread as well.
And I decided I like when I toast it in the oven just enough where there's a little bit of a snap to it when you bite into it. I enjoy that.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to be a good boy and eat my leafy greens. Mm-hmm. So I'll either put spinach on there or arugula or some kale. And if you do arugula, you get a little bit of a peppery component too. Yep. Look at me. I sound like I know what I'm doing.
I know. You actually sound like a foodie. I mean, you did have a podcast of food, dinner and conversation.
Yeah, dinner and good conversation. But that was more of an excuse just to get free food and wine and beer.
So the one thing I will tell you, when next time you make a sandwich like that and you use the leafy greens, obviously season them. And then the other thing is you can if you could do your dressing, a lot of times you could do like a quick toss on it. That usually gives a different flavor whatsoever, which I always appreciate. So I want to dig a little deeper, and I want you to tell folks a little bit more the story about how the podcast came about.
Scotch was started in the saddest way. It was a reaction to 2 dogs dying.
Okay.
Within 10 days of each other, and it destroyed me, and I needed something to keep me occupied. On the 1 year anniversary, because I knew I was just going to be a bawling mess.
Yeah.
And I told my wife at the time, I was like, I need something. I need, and I said, I think I'm going to start a podcast. And she said, yeah, you can do it. And I was like, give me a week where I can just clown around.
Yeah. And
within a week, I had recorded a couple episodes. I think it took me the whole process between recording. Like I batched a bunch. I did I think I did like 4 or 5, just so I could put out a bunch of shows. Yeah. I think I put out 2 or 3 on the first, put it out so people could kind of get to know me. And they were all with just my friends, just people, movers and shakers, kind of like what you do.
Yeah.
Orlando people I knew who had businesses or bands or breweries. And it was also a advertisement for what I was doing at the time. I was selling vintage menswear online and here locally at pop-ups and stuff like that. Talked to my creative accountant, and I said, if I invite my friends over to drink and I mentioned Bama Bama Vintage, can we write that off our taxes? And he said, we can make that happen. It's an advertising expense. Slowly, well, not even slowly. This is where I brag a little.
That's what I want, because
it took off.
Yeah.
Because my guests were amazing and I have a mild gift for gab. And it's not a standard interview. It's very scatological, conversational, and you're going to learn a lot of weird things about the persons. That's not a word. The people I talk to. It's kind of a word. We're going to use it a word. It's a person.
It's a person.
Yeah.
And I think to me, that was one of the things that I found most interesting was that aspect of it. Because in a way, I do, say, hey, check out I don't say I sponsor Deli Fresh. Like I just say, hey, support Deli Fresh Threads or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's one thing I've always loved, the fact that that's kind of how it started. Mm-hmm. I also love the fact that you ask the question, and that's kind of one of the things that I've always appreciated is like your tagline is like asking smart people stupid questions. So my first question, one of my questions when it comes to that is because you kind of ask a bunch of random questions.
Yeah,
which I think makes it fun because it's not the usual experience a guest would have.
It's a conversational interview.
Correct. Yeah. And which is beautiful about it. But I'm kind of curious, like, how did you decide to go that route? And then where do you get those questions from?
I like music a lot. And I used to hate when, my favorite frontman from a band would be on the Tonight Show and the Letterman Show and the Late Show and MTV, and they would be you'd hear the canned answers.
Yeah.
And I want to know when they lost their virginity. I want to know, what their first kiss was like. I want to know what's on their nightstand. I want to know what condiments they have in their refrigerator. And those are piss poor examples of the kind of questions I ask.
Yeah, your questions sometimes are like, I have no idea where you came up with it. And so I remember being on when I was on the podcast, I was like, what? I'm like, where is he taking me? And he was just literally, I was just like, okay. And then it over. And I'm like, what did I say? I don't even know what I said. I
get that a lot.
Yeah. It's kind of like almost like you're going in a spin because you're just kind of in a spin cycle almost. You just start asking random questions, but I think at the same time, you do get to know someone that way.
Absolutely.
And I think it's also very different and a lot of fun. So I'm always curious on people on the creative side of things where do you keep all those questions? And then do you have, like, are you constantly, when you come up with a new one, like, oh my gosh, I've never asked this. This is a great one. Cause you even do it on social. You ask great questions.
I don't think I've repeated a question in 363 shows. If I did, I didn't do it on purpose, and it might be a variation of a question. I had an ongoing list of like 700 where I just add to. I scurry the internet for questions. Reddit, there's a couple other spots, but mostly Reddit at this point.
Yeah,
and it's got to be something really off the wall and something I think I might have an answer to. Yeah, I just like picking people's brains. And one of the nice things is now I'm talking to some pretty major people. Mm-hmm. I took a little hiatus at the beginning of December, and I actually haven't put out an episode since. And it's, March 6th? Does that sound right? 7th? I have an episode coming out March 23rd. It'll be my triumphant return to the internets. And shortly, I'm not sure who I'm going to put out first. I may be doing a special kind of almost radio gimmicky thing with a local person where I'm a single man now, which is awkward because I haven't been single since I was in my late 20s and I'm 55. And one of the things that I can't do on my own is I have a really hairy back, and I think it's disgusting. And I at some point, I want a female to see my back and, my front, mostly my front. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not opposed to the back. I mean, I just want to put it out there, you know, but I mean, I'm more interested in if you're a single female and you want to see my front. But I don't want her to like run her hands down my back and like on Planet of the Apes, like I'm a gorilla. And it's not that bad, but it used to be something that, my amazing ex-wife would help me with, and and now I don't have that, and it's getting out of control. So I think the first show back is going to be a local artist waxing my back.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. And it's very like morning radio gimmicky.
Well, I also think of a 40-year-old virgin where it is just painful from what I can think of.
I think that's a funny way to get back in.
Yeah.
And I don't usually do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's not really my MO.
But I mean, why not do something a little different?
Yeah, if I can bleed for the audience, I feel like, I haven't give them, anything in a couple months. It's the least I can do if you're listening.
Yeah.
I think if all goes well, that'll be my first one. I'm turning it back around to your question.
Yeah, that's fine.
If my second one will be and my conversation with the bass guitarist for the band Sum 41. And I asked him when was the last time he peed sitting down. And because I just think that's a funny question, because I don't pee sitting down. And he said, you don't pee, like, if you get up in the middle of the night, you don't pee sitting down. And it just never occurred to me.
Yeah.
And that's how dumb I am. And I like, no, and he's like, it's just so much easier. You don't have to like turn the lights on.
Yep.
And you don't run the risk of getting pee in the toilet.
Yep. And then your wife doesn't know, and the person, no one gets affected by it.
I don't have a wife.
And you don't step on it, Well, either yourself, you don't step on it yourself anyhow.
Or the teenage, or the cheerleaders that I bring home. Oh, yeah. They're not going to step on it when they get out of bed.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
Sure. Well, why not?
Yeah.
It just never occurred to me. So that episode, we riff on peeing sitting down out of a question for 10 minutes.
That's hilarious.
The pros, and that's Scotch and Good Conversation.
Yeah.
And
in a nutshell,
if you want to know if the bass guitarist from Sum 41 pees sitting down, I'll tell you the answer is yes when he gets up, when he gets up at night. But we go into some that's Scotch in a nutshell, asking smart people stupid questions.
Well, and it's also the fact that originally your thought process was, I want to be able to have it is true. One, you have conversations like when it gets late at night, you start asking weird things, especially when you're drinking.
Yeah.
So it definitely makes sense. And that's one of the nice things about it. You crack open a drink, kind of relaxes the person. Usually some people don't like being on a podcast or radio. No one likes hearing their voice.
Nope.
But at the same time, it also allows you to be able to have that kind of conversation.
Are you comfortable with your voice now?
I am.
Yeah, it's right.
I think
it's funny
I am.
how you kind of grow into it after hearing it 1,000 times.
And it's one of those where I'm now getting to the point. I've been doing this now for 2 years.
Yep.
And I'm starting to get to the point where I'm trying to get better, because now I'm becoming more critical on things like the ums.
Yep.
And I was using amazing word way too often. So I was trying to I started noticing those things as the more you listen.
Don't beat yourself up though.
No, but at the same time, it's one of those where you're like, how can I improve this to get better, to be better as a host? And then the other aspect of it also is the fact that, and it's those are the things that I'm kind of curious, like when you go, because I feel one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is, one, you're super creative. The fact that you've had successful podcast, the fact that you were doing it for a very long time, basically this was your bread and butter, and that's pretty amazing.
My ex-wife was my bread and butter, but I was making money.
Yes, you were making money
in a field that no one makes money in.
Correct. So those things are obviously things that I wanted to always kind of learn. I've always been impressed by with what you've done, and the fact that you've kind of you have created this wonderful network of people. And you've kind of built from, kind of been able to build, which I think is great for anyone who's learning, because a lot of people always ask me the question well, what advice would you give someone starting a podcast?
Don't start a podcast. Never start a podcast. There's too many damn podcasts.
Well, and that's the thing. A lot of people have and that's the other part, because you then talk yourself out of it, because I told someone what I wanted to do. They're like, well, why would you want to do that? What does that have to do with your business? And I was like, I don't know. I just think I could maybe help another business.
Boom, that's it.
That was my whole thing.
Start a podcast.
Yeah. I was like, I wanted to help another business. And I was like, and then at the same time, the other big one, and I'm kind of curious, on what some of your thoughts are, but if no one was listening, if no one was listening to your podcast, it's kind of the same thing for people when you do videos and stuff like that. Would you still do it?
Oh yeah. If I could, I've talked to some, yes, I've talked to some of my musical heroes. The chance to talk to Steve Kilby from the Church, or the front man from Guadalcanal Diary, which is a little band no one knows, but it's one of my favorite bands. I talked to Tommy Stinson from The Replacements, who played in Guns N' Roses for 17 years. You know, I've talked to Brian Baker from Minor Threat and Bad Religion. These are people that I've idolized, and I got to ask them dumb questions, and at the end have them go, "That was fun." It wasn't like a normal interview.
Yeah, and I think that's super important is the fact of how you've been able to figure that out.
Yep.
And do that. One thing that I give you total credit on is the fact that, and that was one of the things that I even tried to do one season, was having my guest ask me a question.
It's scary.
Well, it was a lot of them didn't know what to ask me.
Yep. Yeah,
because they kind of felt like they were framed and they're like, well, do I have to ask you a question concerning business? And I was like, no, I just want to have conversation. And a lot of times that's something that's very difficult.
Yep. People get concerned that they're going to offend you. I let people know there's nothing you can't ask me that. Yeah. And it's got me in trouble. You know, I've the only question I didn't answer, and I kind of round about it, is what I sound like when I'm having an orgasm. Like that someone asked me that, and I was like, people don't need to hear that noise. There's a lot of crying. There's just weeping.
Is there a question that you've ever been asked that you've been surprised by their response?
I talked to a film director recently, like that this episode hasn't been out, and I've been divorced since the beginning of January, so it's pretty fresh.
Yeah.
And I talked to him a bit. I always do kind of a pre-roll, where I said, this is what you can expect. I edit, so if you say something dumb, I can make it go away.
Yep.
And I said, this is my first one in my new studio. I kind of just moved in. I just got divorced, so this is a new spot. So, no, and I told him, like, if something goes wrong, just kind of flow with it. Because stuff wasn't really set up. I didn't know how the room was going to sound.
Yeah.
And it sounds pretty good, taking all into consideration. And he's like, yeah, you mentioned your divorce before we hit record. Why'd you get divorced? And it was fresh. it was, it was like probably, and I haven't listened to it yet.
Yeah. So you haven't edited it yet then?
No, it's probably going to come out in April or May. I've got, I think I got 8 or 9 in the can right now.
Yeah.
So, and the guy's a terrific, I can't remember his name, but he's done a couple films. He did a documentary about how Bill Murray the myth of Bill Murray, and how he just shows up to parties and he talks to people who Bill Murray showed up at their party and just started mixing drinks and washing dishes. And then he did a documentary on Santa Claus. And it's the fact that you have children.
Yeah.
Have you ever took your children to sit on Santa's lap?
Mm-hmm.
You don't know who, in a perfect world, it's Santa or a representative of Santa, but also it could be somebody devious.
Yeah. I've actually seen something devious like that. As a matter of fact, I went to, what was it? We did a Christmas cruise before Christmas. We did a cruise this past year. And I was sitting there and I was by myself in a theater because my wife and daughter had just gone to the bathroom. And Santa arrived and I watched people go to sit. And ironically, it was what offended me or bothered me was the fact that I'm just sitting there watching and I could see that Santa was people were sitting, not sitting on Santa's lap, but sitting next to Santa on a bench. This 15 or 16-year-old girl wearing a short little skirt.
It went and sat on Santa's lap.
He asked her to sit on.
Yeah, see, that seems problematic.
And that totally, I was so bothered. And then the fact that I then see the girl's reaction afterwards, that it hit her, like, oh crap! Like he asked me to sit on his lap, and I sat on his lap.
Santa was bumpy,
and it was, you know what I mean? Like,
Santa.
Yeah. So no, and totally, totally. I totally get it, and that's one of those where you don't even think.
It's a very good. I wish I could remember the name. Well, but here I'm gonna plug it. He did a documentary called Waldo on Weed about a little boy who gets retina cancer, and he's a baby.
Wow.
And his parents decide to go the medical marijuana route in a state that doesn't offer medical marijuana. And they were flying to California, getting medical marijuana, bringing it back to their state.
Oh, wow.
And the little boy's cancer went away and he's been in remission for years. And it's called Waldo on Weed. And anyway, long story short, he asked me why I got divorced, and
that just triggered a bunch of stuff.
But it was, it's what I like. I like a friend could ask me that, and I think I'd give him the same answer.
Yeah.
And was I creative with my words? Because I think maybe my ex-wife might listen. Yes.
Yeah.
But I would be creative with my words anyway, because I think very highly of my ex-wife, and I don't want her mad at me.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah. And, but it's why I decided I'd have my guest ask me a question was it lets them know that I don't have limits to what I'll talk about.
Yeah.
So usually they do it first, after when we hit the questions part, their question is like, that's pretty much how the interview part, the conversation part of the show happens. They ask me a question.
You ask, it's 10 questions, right?
No, it's way less because I'm talking to like rock stars.
Yeah.
And it kind of like got out of hand at one point. I don't know if you know who Frank Turner is. He's an English rock star.
Okay.
And I was going back and forth with his PR people, and they said, Frank's got a hard 30. And I went, okay. And then I went, I don't know what that is after I got off the computer with him. So I hit up somebody who's a bigger podcaster than me. And I was like, what's a hard 30? Because apparently I have a hard 30 and I'm worried about this phrase. He says, you got 30 minutes to do your thing. And normally I'm talkative. My show runs about an hour because I scaled it back.
Yeah.
Because
it used to be longer.
I mean, I've done 2.5 hour shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a 2:45 was the longest I did. And I think it's one of my best shows. Like it was Joseph Martin's from the Hindu Cowboys here in town. He does Sunday Morning Coming Down. Joseph and I drank a whole bunch of bourbon, and he told some amazing stories about getting on stage with U2 and doing his own song, and sleigh riding on Merle Haggard's front lawn.
I think that's got to be one of your favorite parts of the fact is all these different stories that you're getting able to partake on with them. Out of curiosity, because one of the things that you obviously were able to do, and I'm kind of curious on my side of the house, is you obviously got sponsorship, which doesn't usually happen. So do you think it led to the fact that you kind of started using your business originally as kind of like,
that was the plan.
That was the plan, right?
That was the plan to make it look like I was bigger than I was.
And I think that's, and I love that. I absolutely love that you did that, because for me, it's one of those where I'm like, so I'm about, 70 something, 75 plus episodes in.
By the way, congratulations. I listened to your one with Elliot from,
thanks.
What's
Red Panda.
Red Panda.
Yeah.
That boy can cook his butt off. I'm going to take a little credit for finding Elliot and making him the podcast superstar he is now. I met him when I was still doing Bama Pama Vintage.
Okay.
And he came in and bought some vintage clothing from me, and I said, wow, you're cool. You should talk. And he was still at Smiling Bison at that point. And he came in and we talked, and he was like, this is great. And then he was like, when can I come on again? I had him on again, and then he had his own show for a little while.
Yeah, off cuts.
And then he did a music one for a little while. And he is a fascinating dude and an amazingly talented chef.
Yeah, he's definitely was a fun conversation.
Yeah, he's smart as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very smart. What I also enjoy. So let's go back to the idea of the sponsorship thing.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
I didn't even cover that.
Yeah, that's fine. So my question, I guess I'm kind of curious on is, so did they start coming to you, or did you start going to them and start saying like, hey, are you interested in sponsoring? Or the people were like, hey, I heard, I see you got some sponsors.
A little both.
A little bit of both.
I hit up my friends. First of all, like what I did was when I started the podcast, I sent out a mass email saying, hey, I'd appreciate any help you can get. And some of my sponsors are just product.
Yeah.
Some of my sponsors are money. I'd love to have it more money. I mean, I love my product. Like I love free beer. I love free food. I love free scotch. I got an amazing scotch sponsor, Compass Box Whiskey, like hooks me up. It's the one I wanted. And that was the whole premise. I was hoping I'd get a free bottle of scotch from somebody coming in, and now I got a proper scotch sponsor. And the DeWitt Law Firm is very, very good to me. Mo DeWitt, injured on the go, just call him a plug.
Yeah.
See what I did? I did it right in your show.
You plugged it. You plugged it. Now I got.
Mo, I love you.
Shout out to Mo. Super, as a true podcast host would do. One of the things that I thought also was interesting was, and I think that's kind of one of the fun parts, is the fact that it's not just, so you kind of obviously originally it was like friends, then it kind of went to, I mean, you've had everything from your favorite teacher to your mom.
That was a fun one. Ex-girlfriends.
Yeah, ex-girlfriends on, and obviously actors, authors.
I had a guy who fired me from a job. That was pretty funny.
You had him on?
Yeah. John Washburn fired me from Washburn Imports, so I had him in. Yeah, that was funny. I like making things awkward. I think awkward is funny.
No, awkward is funny. And I think people like that, especially since I'm pretty sure that it was more awkward for him than for you.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I like John, and he's got a great product, and the Imperial is an amazing place. I just wanted to talk to him, and he, in a roundabout way, said he shouldn't have fired me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know, but I would have, we drank a lot. It was a lot of tomfoolery. One of my favorite ones was my high school teacher. I got to tell her I love her, and she had a huge influence on me, and we both cried. The one with my ex-girlfriend and now my ex-wife, my wife at the time and an ex-girlfriend, was amazing.
Yeah.
I think it was hilarious. And I started it by saying, what the hell are we doing? Why are we doing this?
Yeah, why?
Why? This makes on paper, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
And I think they're probably better friends than I am with them now, which is pretty funny anyway.
That's always...
I like awkward. Like I think awkward's funny because we all get awkward, but no one admits it.
Yeah.
And the 3-year anniversary of me talking to Tommy Stinson from The Replacements, one of my all-time favorite bands, and Guns N' Roses and a couple other bands, was 3 years ago this week. And it is the most nervous I've ever been. I was supposed to get a half an hour with him, and in the pre-roll, he was like, I got 15 minutes and I gotta go pick my daughter up from school. And I was trying to take an hour show and stick it in a half an hour, and then I had to stick it in 15 minutes. Although we did talk about the decline of waterbeds in society on that one.
Okay.
That was my question. What the hell happened to all the waterbeds? And we riffed on that for 5 minutes of a 15-minute show, And what happened? But they were all over waterbed land. That was like in every town.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they disappeared. Where'd all the waterbeds go?
They all got deflated.
Yeah. Sprung leaks.
That could definitely be definitely go the route the way to go. I'm kind of curious on when you've gone the route of, like, I guess one is like, and these are some of the things that I guess people don't realize, but when you're doing a podcast, you do. And I tend to, the fact of the scheduling.
Mm-hmm. It's hard.
Trying to find the right people.
Yep.
Trying to stay, one of the things that I give major props to you and to like of so many different other podcasters that have been doing it for so long is the consistency. Cause I tried to go the route of,
it's a grind.
It is definitely a grind. It's definitely trying to figure out the way of going trying to build, I guess, build that, like you said, like putting them in the can to kind of be able to give you some leeway. So you're not kind of constantly rushing to the end because you want consistency to be able to do that. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of being consistent when it comes to forming, either providing, because it's not just podcasts for you. It's also the fact of having to advertise it, the consistency of having to use social media, and all things that even a business needs to use. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, now, like at first it was just I said I was going to do it, I'm going to do it thing. But now people are paying me to put out a product, and I take that I don't take a whole lot of things seriously, but I take that very seriously because I pride myself on putting out something decent.
Yeah.
So what I decided I was going to do is I was going to have like tons in the can, just in case, a family emergency or I wanted to take a vacation. Although I've been on vacation and put out podcasts, I just bring my laptop with me and hit go, and on Wednesday night it goes out to the world. As far as consistency in podcasting goes, that's the way to just continue getting an audience. And I've been very, very, very fortunate. I haven't put out an episode since the beginning of December. I had a monster month. January, which typically is low numbers, and February beat January. And I think it's because my last episode, I'm not gonna lie, I just literally found out that my marriage was ending.
Yeah.
And I don't think I say it. I haven't listened to it because I just can't, because my head was in a weird place. But I pretty much say I'm just going to take a step away and try to figure out if I still love this, if I still need to do it. And the answer was almost no. I had lost the passion for it, but I had a lot of people. I think you might have said you need to do it.
Yeah.
I'll miss it, or, your voice will be missed. And I love the process. It's just the grind is hard. And sometimes you're on top of the world and you're like, everybody's listening to me. I don't honestly don't want to be famous. Money's nice.
Yeah.
I just want to talk to cool people,
yeah,
make some money, make myself proud, make people who love me proud. If I get to talk to cool people, I'm pretty stoked. And if I can get paid for it, I'm even more stoked. But the consistency is the thing. And to take a couple months off was scary. Yeah. And I'm still scared because my numbers this month, it's only the 6th, are in the pits. But I don't have an episode until the 23rd coming out. So I'm hoping that people will come along for the ride. I think they'll be okay. I've got some pretty big guests, and there are going to be some subtle changes. But I honestly think I have a really good product. It's not a normal interview. It's definitely... I don't know another podcast. I'm not claiming I've listened to a billion podcasts, but I don't know another one who does the kind of interview I do. And some of my music heroes have said that was fun. That was different. I enjoyed that because they get the same thing. What's it like to tour? When's the next record coming out? When, or director, when's your next film coming out? How do you pick your cast? That kind of stuff. And I don't ask I ask some of that stuff. I kind of have to, but I make a joke out of it. I was like, I'm going to get in trouble with my listeners if I don't find out when your next record's coming out. Or are you guys getting along? Do I need to worry about your band?
Yeah.
It's fun. And I owe a big thank you to my listeners because I've gotten some emails saying we miss you, saying, please come back. We miss your voice, and it's what I needed. I'm not gonna lie. Like we've talked off mic.
Yeah.
I was in a blue place.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of in a blue place, and I'm still finding if I'm in love with it. I think I am. I think it shows. Come along for the journey. It's going to be different. Like it might get a little heavy, but I like awkward. I think we all have this stuff. We all go through this. We all do. I think it's interesting to put it out into the world. And does the world know everything? No. But the world's going to know some stuff. It might get me in trouble with some people, but it was started on I'm going to be as truthful as I can. Kind of the Howard Stern kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And this is a long-winded answer. Here's the one thing I've learned along the way. Especially the first 100 or so are just people from Orlando. And I'm very aware that someone who lives, in Idaho doesn't want to talk to the brewer from Ravenous Pig. They might enjoy craft beer, but it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to.
Correct.
And I'm very sure, although Murray Attaway from Guadalcanal Diary, one of my all-time favorite writers, most of the world doesn't know Guadalcanal Diary. They should. They're an amazing band. What I found is people will tune in because me, which is weird because I'm just a dude, I'm just a guy, but they're vested in the story. They want to know how Rosie is. They want to know, people have asked how Dee Dee's doing, my ex-wife.
Because you've built that relationship. You've built that connection with them, even though you're the voice. And
what I've been doing, another plug, I'm going to plug myself. If you want to know really what's going on between the time I stopped the podcast and right now, patreon.com/Scotch and Good Conversation is a place where I've been dumping pretty much all my feelings and thoughts. And all the stuff from the time I stopped the podcast until the time I started the podcast is available to the public. I turned off the Patreon because I didn't want my patrons paying for something that wasn't happening.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I've been posting videos of the new studio because that's what we're calling it. It's a studio. It's not a small studio. It's a studio apartment. It's a studio apartment.
Total studio. One of the things that I think that I appreciate as well, because of the fact that, that is the fact of one, trying to you're basically doing it all. It's not like you have, it's like me. And so I totally appreciate the fact of how you've done it for so long, because you do the edits. You're booking the guests, you're trying to coordinate everything.
Research.
And you're researching.
Contrary to popular belief, I do not have research monkeys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the research is hard.
Yes.
I had the, what's his name? Sid Butler, who was in a band called Les Evie Fair. But he right now he is the bass guitarist in Seth Meyers' show's band. Yeah. He was handpicked by Fred Armistead for the band.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I got done with the episode, and he was like, "How did you know I was a brown belt in martial arts?" And what I did was I went to his wife's sister's Facebook page to find that out. Research is because I want to find out the most obscure stuff about my guest.
When you do this, are you writing? I'm always curious where people put all this, like where they write all this stuff down. Are you a phone guy? Are you old school pad and paper?
I got an iPad because I can't read my own handwriting, and my spelling is atrocious. So everything's on an iPad. And then what I do is I'll take screenshots of that and post them on patreon.com/gotchagoodconversation. So if you want behind the scenes stuff,
that's cool.
And the neat thing is also neat. There's a word. The groovy thing is also you'll get to see some of the questions I don't ask, or my roundabout notes and stuff, which I think is interesting.
Now the questions you don't ask, is that because it just doesn't lead there, or is it just because of the fact that you're just kind of like, I don't need to kind of go that route?
A little both.
Yeah.
You never know what you're going to get, especially with somebody who I've never talked to before. And you kind of feel the conversation that's going on. You're a podcaster.
The hard part is when you don't find
that groove.
Let's call, like the two things that I will say that to you, and just so that people understand, because that is one, like if you have a guest who you have to pull,
it's hard.
It is excruciating.
Yeah.
The other part is when you can't find anything about them, or they don't want to provide you any information, and they feel like everything, because like my whole thing is I want people to be able to share and be able to kind of like be able to give some insight or something and understand like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm kind of helping and sharing. But there's people out there that don't want to share.
Yep.
And don't want to go that route. And I think that's kind of the most difficult aspect of it, is when you're doing that and you're spending all that time researching. Because I'm old school. Like I have like literally two.
I see you got a
I have two notebooks.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I just use composition notebooks, and I have one where I literally write, I write and I just start looking and I start listening and I listen to other podcasts. I start writing my little, jotting down my notes. That's why I was kind of curious how other podcasters do it, because, I feel like one, I don't want you to have to tell your story over again.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
You know what I mean? Like no one wants to do that. And at the same time, like if I'd much rather say it to you, say a quick, like, hey, this is how we kind of started. This is how it went. And then people can then from there get something out of it. I think that's kind of, because at the end of the day, I'm like, that's what I want. I want information from you. But the hardest one definitely has to be the fact of like, you get a guest that you're like, wow, this is excruciating.
I do my research before I reach out to somebody. Correct. Like to see if this person actually has a story. Because ultimately it's pretty selfish. Like I don't want to talk to somebody I don't want to talk to.
Yeah.
There's been a few where I went, I shouldn't have done that. There's been one or two where I just ditched the whole episode. Like, I just
didn't even go. It didn't even air.
Didn't air. Yeah. There's been one or two that went just horribly wrong, or I just didn't feel like I had a pretty major rock star that I ditched the thing, and it was on me.
And like what happened? So when that stuff like that happens, especially when you have like,
I
pretty known
celebrity. I just lie to their PR people.
You're like, just something
the file
happened.
got
corrupted.
Yeah.
And we can't record again. We're not going to record again. So
the major rock star, and I'm not saying who he was,
no.
because I screwed up his name not once but twice in the first 5 minutes of the thing, and then he I'm just gonna say it was on me.
He got turned off.
Yeah, he just got snarky, and we didn't quite cut it short, but I definitely didn't use all my questions.
Yeah,
I wasn't feeling it. I've deleted a couple just because I didn't like them early on. It's the most selfish thing I've ever done. Yeah. Like, I just want to talk to cool people.
Yeah.
I want to have some fun. If I get some free stuff or some money, money's really cool. But I honestly didn't think it would be a thing. I didn't think I would be.
And I think that's one of the reasons why it works, though.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times if you have the intention, like you kind of nailed it in the beginning when I asked about, would you do this even if no one was listening? And I think that's really the thing is like, you have to, I mean, a lot of people tend to, when they start something, there's a reason why, people don't, and because you have an entrepreneurial spirit. You've always been an entrepreneurial spirit. You had an environmental cleaning business before. You had had your vintage, you had your vintage company. So you understand that it's not like a quick thing. Mm-mm. And podcasting even more so, because now you at least 8 years ago were one of the, there wasn't many to begin. There wasn't that many at first. Now you got me, dime a dozen. Everyone's got one.
Oh, no, but you're different and good too.
No, and I appreciate that, but I mean, it's true though. Every single celebrity has a podcast.
Yeah, Dr. Phil's got one. He doesn't need a podcast.
Every single person's got a podcast. Every TV show has a podcast now that you used to watch a TV show of. They now have a podcast. So yeah, it's very competitive to be able to do that. And so a lot of times, if you kind of went the route where you actually stopped, you're like, well, no one's listening. Then, they're like, why am I doing this? But that's the whole thing. Like you got to have a good product.
Yep.
Because even if you're going, hopefully you're improving as you go. And in your case, I mean, that's kind of how it went. You got better in the craft. You got better guests.
Yeah.
Because as you start going, you start building that. And then that's one of the great things, because you always ask the question, like, who have I not listened to?
Yep.
Who have I not spoken to? And then obviously it's a lot easier when someone comes in and looks and goes, oh, you had the guy who, did Clerks, or you had all these, rock stars.
Well, the guy, Sid Butler from Le Savoir-Faire and the Seth Meyers show, he said, you should talk to Fred Armistead. And I emailed him and I said, can I use your name? And I normally don't even do that. I just that's on another level.
That one's, you kind of need that for a Fred Armistead.
Yeah. But I usually will just go, hey, so-and-so said I should reach out to you. But I know it's not like, I mean, although I think he might answer his own emails, it's just they've been buried under every other email. But if I put, Sid Butler in the headline, that'd be cool, because he's the kind of person I want to talk to. A creative, smart, funny, punk rock, entrepreneurial spirit, a creative type.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. Like I still don't know what I'm doing. Like I don't have a clue.
But okay, so even though you say that, what are some tips that you would give someone that you think have been some of your keys? Obviously doing a different type of show, find your niche, or find your thing that works, that you can be consistent with.
Yep. Consistency.
Because that's kind of the big one.
Yep.
What else can what else do you think has been the level of taking you to your success?
Pick your guest really carefully. You're not as funny as you think you are if you're starting a comedy podcast. If you're a bunch of knuckleheads who are going to get together because you have funny conversations, because when you're drunk, you're not that funny. Check yourself, or you're going to be wasting time. And the reason I say that is because everybody does that, and then they leave their podcast up, and you and I get buried under that stuff, so don't start it if you're not going to finish it. And I don't know when the expiration date on Scotch A Good Conversation is. I mean, I was thinking about that at 4:00 this morning. I don't see it anytime soon.
Yeah.
But I also don't know that I want to do this when I'm 70.
Yeah.
Although, I have no idea. Like I love it. As far as like, if you want to start it, read up, learn your product, buy good equipment if you can. I mean, I get it. I mean, I started with $35 mics. I started with two $35 mics and some borrowed mic stands, and I recorded right into a laptop.
Yeah.
Like that. That's like, I took
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the jack that goes into that. I used a really old MacBook because it had 2 inputs in it.
Yep.
And that's my first 100 or so shows, and then I progressed from there. And be prepared to grind. You're editing at 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
You're doing research on your phone when you're on the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
It is if you want it bad enough, and that's the thing. It took me a little while to figure out I want it.
Yeah.
And as long as I'm having fun, I'm going to continue doing it.
Have you? And I brought up a topic about the entrepreneurial aspect. Was your family entrepreneurial? Was that like, how does that, I'm always kind of curious about that, just because for me, like, I'm the first in my family to run any form of business, even though I have a full-time job. I've been running my business.
Your business rules, and there's passion behind it too.
Correct. But my question is, like, were you brought up that way? Cause I'm always kind of curious on where people get it from. And what led them to become entrepreneurial like that and kind of want to go that route?
My growing up, we were not well off. My dad was a banker, which wasn't as lucrative as it sounded. He was an auditor.
Yeah.
My mom worked as a receptionist and did bookkeeping for like a private doctor. My dad got fired, laid off after 20 years in the banking industry in 1970, maybe 81. And it was just a struggle from that point forward. My dad did as much as he could do to provide. And it was always a hustle, but in a good, he was always working, always doing something. You had mentioned the cleaning company. He came home and he's like, I'm starting a cleaning company. And I was like, do you know how to clean? He's like, well, I got a mop, and what he did is brilliant. My mom was in the medical industry, worked for doctors' offices. He cleaned doctors' offices.
There you go.
You know what are typically not dirty? Doctor's offices.
Yeah, you're just doing trash.
Yeah, you're taking the trash out, and wiping down,
vacuuming.
And he had a bunch of those kind of things. When I met my ex-wife, I was working for Kinko's, unfortunately, and I worked there for 9 years, 9 months, and about 12 days, and they let me go New Year's Eve of 2001. And I was a company man. I was in management. I wanted to run a store, and that's not me. You met me.
Yeah.
I am pretty anti-corporations. Within reason. There's some good corporations, and I felt like Kinko's was one of them for a while. And again, I got an amazing person in my life because I got a lot of amazing friends, and I got whatever. From that point forward, I worked for myself, and I had some very, very successful things, some things that could have been more successful if it wasn't for the recession or, I sold stuff online. I did vintage menswear. I did a cleaning company. The podcast, I'm never going to get rich podcasting. But I can, if you want to sponsor Scotch, a Good Conversation, email me.
Or Deli Fresh Goods.
Or
lunch with Biggie.
See, this is what I do.
It's okay.
Here's what I'll tell you. If you're listening and you have a business, first email Biggie because his product is great. Let me finish.
Okay.
His product is great. And for what Biggie's going to charge you, you can't buy commercial radio spot. And what I can tell you about Biggie's audience is they're dedicated, they love his product, and they're going to listen every single time. And then they're going to go out and use your product. And you're going to get a dedicated audience for a fraction of what you do if you're advertising on the radio. And you're going to get a one-on-one relationship with Biggie or with me or with any of the local. Go local because it affects your community.
Do you think when it comes to something like that, does it matter? Because obviously you think of it this way. In your case, it makes sense because you have DeWitt Law, right? Mm-hmm. Which obviously is everyone usually needs a lawyer, especially
you're
locally.
Injured on the go, just call Mo.
Yeah. You know what I mean? So in that sense, it kind of works out. But if you were to be let's say when you had your vintage menswear, where would you have gone to go and if you were looking to be hey, this is an affordable way for me to hit, to sponsor my business?
I'd go to podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely would because you're going to get a more dedicated, more personalized, like tailor-made for you. Like my sponsors, they'll tell me, I'm doing this on this date. Do you have an episode coming out? Can you promote that? Or I've got this product coming out. Can you promote that? Yeah. And with Mo DeWitt, with his advertising package, he gets his own once a month show. It's called A Good Synopsis, where I sit down and talk with Mo, and we talk about law questions. But it's mostly not law. I cover some law questions because I just figured I have to.
Because it's have to. Yeah.
But also it's what's going on in his life. He's always got some sort of wacky advertising scheme where he puts on a gorilla suit or something. But he's a hell of a lawyer and a good dude.
Well, he's having fun.
But when he approached me and today I'd like to sponsor the podcast, I was like, I don't know, man. I don't have a good feeling in my mouth. It doesn't seem like on brand.
Yeah.
And I said, why don't you come in the studio and we'll just talk? If anything else, you get a free plug on my wildly popular, influential podcast. And he came in, and I really like Mo. He's a good guy. He's a great lawyer, and he gives back to the community. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'll have him on, and he's my best sponsor. I mean, I love all my sponsors, but he's the moneymaker.
He's the moneymaker.
Yeah.
One thing that you brought up, and you obviously will understand, you totally get this. I don't know, and I know why the psychology aspect of it is, but what I almost wish I had, and I know you know what I'm gonna say.
No, I don't.
You almost wish there was I had I don't know, my room or something bugged or recording. So when the mics come off,
that's where the good stuff starts.
That's when the conversation really I feel like. Yeah. And then afterwards, I'm like, man, I really wish I recorded this because it's so good. But then what happens is you put your guard down, and then
the mics are off.
Yeah, the mics are off. You put your guard down. You're like, okay, I'm done. I don't.
Everybody goes, that was fun.
Yeah. And then after that, then they start talking, and then you're like, man, this is the good. This is the content I wanted for my listeners to have. And I'm like, and have you figured out the secret to that? How do you get?
I used to get that more when I was not as loose as I am.
Yeah.
I'm pretty structured. It doesn't sound structured, but I am structured. I also now most of my interviews are on FaceTime or
Zoom and stuff like that.
People aren't hanging out.
Yeah.
And also, I'm just lucky. I'm talking to some pretty major people.
Yeah.
And they do not hang out.
There is no hangout.
They usually have another interview lined up 10 minutes after mine, and just enough time to take a pee-pee and then be on the phone at 1:45. So I usually try to be, I'll go, is there anything you want me to cut out? We cool? And then I'll tell them what the next, this is going to come out on this date. I'll shoot an email. If you promote it, that would be really great. I get especially, when you're doing people, or respect, because you talk to amazing business people, creative types here in town, and especially if they had fun, which is a sign that you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
If they want to sit and talk and talk about how much fun they had and don't want the conversation to end, that means you're good at what you do.
I'm very bad at taking a compliment.
I know you're good at what you do, dude.
And I appreciate that, especially coming from you. But and that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to be one of the first people I had, because when it came to having podcasts, because it sounds, some people are like, well, that's weird. Why are you going to have a guy who has on a podcast? And I was
going to talk about it on my podcast.
Well,
also.
Yeah. Well, and I look at it that way.
Smart.
But one of the things how I look at it, and I think this is kind of how I look at it. And I think for me, my big thing is and you and I are very similar in the sense, the idea of the synergy, I'm all about the fact of I want to be able to help good people, and I want to be able to tell good people's stories and be able to share that. Some people don't understand that. So they don't understand that it's a two-way street a lot of times when you're kind of going and you're providing, especially when it's a local small business. I don't know what it is, but there's a disconnect.
Yep.
And a lot of times I think the disconnect, it's not fully a disconnect. I think a lot of it is the fact that just like you and I, we're solopreneurs. So therefore we're doing everything. And because we're doing everything, we sometimes, when we get so busy, we don't have time to realize oh crap, I need to also share this. It's not just oh, I was just on it, I did this and that's it. Even though it's beneficial for both of us to spread the word.
Trying to think if I have a book. I think I gave it to somebody. There's a book called Big Podcast you should read. I think I actually
Big podcast.
And they talked about that. Like, not everybody's going to share your episode, even
Yeah.
if you want them to.
It's crazy. It's crazy to see how that works. I mean, I did it even when I was doing my sandwich eat up events. I was like, the idea was for me to be able to do those events. And that's kind of one of those things where it goes back to like, do what you love, even if no one else is watching or doing. And I would do it because I wanted to share and I wanted my community to be able to figure out new places to eat. But man, did it eat me up when
I used to get bent out of shape.
Right? When you do those things and then no one is either spreading the word either. And you're like, well, wait a second. It's always my people going. Where are your people? Like, that was kind of the whole idea of the synergy.
That's the thing, is it's so simple online to hit the share button.
Yeah.
It's so simple to hit like that. And that will affect whatever, not just our podcast or your clothing line.
Yeah.
Like your favorite restaurant or your favorite band, that affects their algorithm and lets more people know about it. The thing that kills me is you go to Facebook or Instagram and there's 1,000 people holding a picture of a Starbucks cup. I ordered this latte fundamental triple with cheese.
Yeah.
And holding it. And effing Starbucks doesn't need your advertisement.
Correct.
You know who needs your advertisement? Deli Fresh Threads.
Yeah.
You know who needs your advertisement? Lunch with Biggie. Your friends are doing something creatively. Hit the share button. That's why it's there. It literally takes you a second. You don't even have to say, hey, Lunch with Biggie, my favorite podcast, she just put out this amazing podcast with Peter from Scotch, a good conversation. You don't have to do that. Just hit the share button, and your friends will know about it.
Do you think there's an underlying reason why people don't, like, maybe, and I'll even say friends or people that is there an underlying reason why you think people don't do that and actually don't share? I do sometimes think that there's a certain level, and it's not one of those where they're like jealous or anything like that, but I think
maybe a little bit.
There's a certain level where I just find it very interesting that it's very easy for some to be like, oh my God, look at this. And then but it's so hard to go the other route. And for a very long time, I had a very big issue with it. And I knew I had an issue with it because it was like one of those things where I was like, damn, I'm filling everybody else's cup, but no one's filling my cup.
Oh man, you and I have that in common,
right?
Yeah, and I had to let that go.
And then I realized,
it'll eat you up.
And I start, doing therapy and everything. I realized that really wasn't what it was. It was just the fact that I needed to, I have to fill my own cup. I don't need to worry about someone else filling my cup for me.
Yeah.
And so then that's when I realized, it's part of the process. It's that journey. It's that whole doing this because I want to do it, not because if no one else listens or does listen, it's something that I get the opportunity to. Because the reason I like the podcast is because it gives me this chance to actually have that conversation with a guest that you don't usually get to have when you're in the day to day. It's usually like a DM, like, hey, what's going on? Or hey, good job. What's going on? How you doing? And then you're like, oh, busy. And then that's all you get. And then when you can sit down and actually have a conversation, you make that connection.
Here's the way I look at it is most people aren't going to share. I just think it's a nice surprise when someone does, especially not that we're both podcasters. I'm talking to bigger people.
Yeah.
If a bigger person will share my podcast, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'll write them a personal.
Yeah.
You have no idea how much that means to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I just assume they're not going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Local people weren't doing it. And that's kind of part of and I still have a little chip on my shoulder. I'm working on that. Part of the reason I started to phase out of local was I was, I don't have your numbers, but I'm just assuming you did an hour, 2 hours worth of research on me, and we know each other a little bit. And then you drove over here. You're going to probably, that's time away from your family. You're going to probably spend a couple hours editing. You're going to spend a couple hours doing social media.
Yep.
This episode, which is clocking in at right about 1 hour right now, including our time, which is fun. I hope you're enjoying this.
I am.
It's probably going to cost you 15, 20 hours worth of your life.
Yeah.
I will share it as much as I can, and I implore you in the listening audience, I don't know if that's the word I was looking for. I hope in the listening audience that you will share this for Biggie, and you will help other small businesses because it's free and it costs you nothing. If you like it, share it, please. it's a win on society when you help a small independent business in your community. Just makes sense.
No, I totally agree with that. With that said, we'll do 2 more things.
Okay.
What's your advice for someone starting something?
Anything?
Never
try. No. Don't do it unless you're going to do it. Like, if it's something you're passionate about, at least do it as long as give yourself a shelf life. How about that? And go, I'm going to do it until this point, and then I'm going to re-examine and see if I still love it, if I'm good at it. Take constructive criticism to heart. You're not always right.
Yeah.
If people tell you you're bad at it, the people you respect tell you you're bad at it, you're probably bad at it.
How many people, though, do you think will actually tell you that you're bad at it?
I've had people tell me I was bad at it when I started. I was bad at it when I started.
And how many episodes did you do? When like you in the beginning?
Yeah, I did them all.
Because that's the other part of it, though, because what you said was it makes sense, but the other part of it is if you suck at it but you love it,
do it anyway. Yeah,
do it anyway. But at the same time, try to take that constructive criticism and try to get better at it, because in time you're gonna you listen to episode, because when I started I did 12 episodes and then I said, well, I'm gonna do 12 and see where I'm at, then start tweaking. And then kind of go from there. I mean, you kind of have to use a litmus, but that is the key. You have to continue on.
Yeah.
And hopefully by the time you get to your first 12 versus your 75th to 100.
Hopefully you're better.
You better be better.
I don't know. I've listened to some really bad podcasts. I don't really listen to podcasts anymore.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
There's one or two
you do.
I listened to your Elliott one, which is really good. There's 1 or 2 American history podcasts I listen to. And I listen to Up First, the NPR podcast in the morning. I've been trying to listen to more music because that just is. I don't, and you probably don't want to listen to other podcasts and start picking up the way they do things. You
Correct.
Get your own style.
That's kind of where I've noticed as well. Like I kind of stopped. Yep. And if I do, I usually will listen to like a sports or something, just something different.
So unrelated.
Yeah, unrelated. There, it's not the same thing.
Smart move.
How can people follow you?
Oh, thank you.
How can people follow? How can they listen? How can they share your content?
ScotchAndGoodConversation.com, Scotch and Good Conversation, pretty much anywhere on the internet. Instagram, join the Facebook group, Scotch and Good Conversationalist. I seriously would love for you to go over to patreon.com/Scotch and Good Conversation. Look around. You're going to get behind the scenes stuff. You get behind the scenes interviews. After I interview somebody, they usually I'll ask them some additional questions. There's some blogs with poorly written sentences and punctuation. There was a video component I was doing called I'm Peter von Taborsky. I got shit on my mind. I'm probably going to do another one of those because I've got a lot of shit on my mind now. There's some naked pictures of me up there. There's pictures of my dog. You get behind the scenes show notes. There are some naked pictures of me up there. I mean, they're just like my ass and stuff. You know David Lawrence, don't you?
Yes. But he's done some amazing pictures of you.
Yeah, he'll take naked pictures of you if you want.
I know he would. I know. I'm not there yet.
Oh, come on. You're handsome.
I'm not there yet.
ScotchGoodConversation.com. Thank you so much. This is fun. I was looking forward to it.
I really appreciate it, man. That's our show for today. Thank you so much for Peter of Scotch and Good Conversation for being on and having lunch with me, my extended lunch with me. Definitely make sure to check him out online. Like I said, definitely check his podcast out. He's got some really good episodes that you want to check out. I have been a guest on it. One thing that's very interesting that I did not talk about was he has a rule, and obviously some rules are meant to be broken, but he has a rule where he doesn't bring guests back. So it's kind of like one-time thing.
I do now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe, but at one point he did after 300 something episodes, which is great. If you enjoyed the show, definitely make sure to subscribe, comment, give, rave reviews, do all that goodness.
Share.
If you definitely want to support and check out my brand, you can check out Deli Fresh Threads, do some shopping, tell your friends. Thank you. Until next time, keep eating sandwiches and follow your passion.